I want you to operate on the principle to make as many calls as humanly possible. Because here's the reality of it. If you have, let's say, 10 to 12 hours a day to call, let's say that's your schedule, you may run days like Chris Sarantino mentioned the other day, where you have, let's say, he had like 496 calls he made outbound within 3 days, not one. And he made his first sale on the 497th and then the second sale on the 498th. Okay. All of those are triple dial too. So it made even more calls than that. So, but what he averaged, let's say, what about 200, maybe 175 calls each day, probably more like 200. Is that a success or is that a failure? Well, I mean, he did make sales after all. It took a couple of days, and that's kind of how the cookie crumbles sometimes. This is kind of my point. I don't want you to, it's important to have numbers in mind of what you want to accomplish, but don't over obsess with the numbers. What I want you to obsess with is, are you applying the inputs to the maximal amount as possible? Okay. If you're on the phone all day and you're legitimately doing everything you should be, which is dialing from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, or from 11 in the morning to 9 at night, or whatever your numbers are, and you're literally dialing that entire time with the exception of a few breaks in between, nothing excessive, then I would say that's a success. Now, some days you may only dial 50, but you've had like 10 presentations, right? Some days you'll be like Chris, where you'll dial 200 calls and not get anything. The point is you've got to do all of this consistently if you want to have success. How it pans out every day is just random. But I can tell you this, and and hopefully this is connecting. If you're doing this, if you're doing that kind of effort to get on the phone, talk to people, keep things going, the numbers will work itself out. Okay. It's likewise if you guys are doing face-to-face, the same thing applies. If you're out in the field door knocking, how many door knocks do you do a day? As many as you humanly possibly can, right? You start on time and you go to the last moment. Now, I'll tell you this, differentiating factor between mediocrity and success many times is the last calls. The difference that Chris could have quit on the 495th call. And he probably, as all of us could, justified why he did it. Well, shit, nobody's buying. I made 500 calls. It's not working. I feel validated in my opinion. And he could have hung up the phone and patted himself on the back and saved his ego. But because he's a pro, he realizes that sometimes it's just that little extra inch of digging that gets you to the gold. Okay. And this is what happened. He made like two grand in commissions because he made that 496th and 497th call. And that's where you're going to find the difference between success and failure. A lot of us guys, we want to quit. We've been beat up all day, had a rough day. You're not special. It's how everybody has. Once in a while, it's bad like that. So use that as a principle, right? How many calls are you going to make? Probably on average between 100 and 200, but don't stop when you get to 100. Don't stop when you get to 200. That's just kind of an estimate of what to expect. Okay. Now, the more important thing, I think, if you hold that true, that constant, I will call as much as humanly possible for all the hours I'm available on the phone. The other element of that is just as important, if not more important, is the amount of leads that you buy. And so if you're part-time, you really need to be buying 40 to 50 Facebook leads weekly. Okay. 40 to 50, because in reality, a good agent converts 5 to 7%. So off of 50, that's just 3 deals, right? If you're full-time, you need to be at 100 minimum. Now you don't have to start there. You may have to start at 50, then build into 75 to 100, but I want you to all grasp in telesales the vast importance of having opportunity. The telesales game is a little different from face-to-face in that they're both are numbers games to an extent, but telesales is that much more so. You've got to have the volume of leads on your side. And I would assume that it's better to assume you're not like some, God's gift to final expense sales, that you're just kind of like good, but you're not great, but you're not average, and build your business off of being just good enough. Okay. And if you're just good enough, then you need to make up for your inadequacy and your skill set as you develop it with leads. Now, maybe over time you become very good and you only need 75, But still, that's a lot of leads, because the nature of telesales is you got to work through a lot of junk. Some people never pick up the phone. It's just the way it is. You can complain about it and wish it was different, or you can deal with reality, which is you got to buy 100 a week. Plus, some people do even more. So again, full-time final expense telesales agents, that's just the way it is. Work your way up to that point, and understand that part of your ability to have success in any insurance business, any sales business, is to have an opportunity in enough quantity. With telesales, it's a huge quantity, because it does the nature of the business, the close rates are going to be lower. Now, if you're face-to-face, you don't need as much per se. Maybe you do if you're a crazy full-time workaholic like I was, but you can get by on 50 Facebook leads a week full-time. Direct mail even less, 25 to 30. So against the nature of the type of sales in that case, plus the type of lead. So leads you do not have as much. So again, back to telesales, though, that's the big thing. You want to make sure on an outbound basis that you have the opportunity availability to you. As far as when to call, when the sun rises, when to stop calling, 9 o'clock at night. What's the best time between those 12 to 14 hours? Probably first thing in the morning, and then definitely 3 or 4 o'clock on to 9 o'clock at night. That leads local time. So, that's true probably for face-to-face as well. As the best time to see people. I used to start at 8 in the morning near the end of my full-time career in the field, and I would go as late as 8 or 9 o'clock at night. People see all day. Weekends are fine. Weekdays are fine. I never personally work Sunday, but I've heard of agents that have had success. All time of the year is good. There's really no seasonality to this business, in my opinion. If there's some off weeks, probably Christmas week, Thanksgiving week, maybe 4th of July week. With the leads calling you, they're going to be interested more often than not in life insurance, and they're taking the risk of calling a salesperson to be pitched. They know that, okay? So the interest level, the intent is much higher. So you don't need as many leads. My recommendation is 15 to 20 a week. Our minimum in our program is 15 a week. I prefer 20. If you're set up like what we're saying, we're kind of instructing you to do, the lead flow is absolutely there. John got, I think, after taking out some of the junk, 11 or 12. And there are agents who are getting 15 to 20. And I bring that up because typically TV leads are very hard to fill. That's what our experience was last year. But it has not been the case now. If you got the states, and you got the time to be available. That's the big thing. So with that, you just have to sit around, do nothing while you wait for the leads to come in. Once you're on the phone, they stop sending them to you. There should be, at least. They don't bill you for them. And then it's basically the same pitch that you do with an outbound. Wow. Well, I expect all sorts of orders coming in immediately after the conclusion of this call. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. So that's our lineup, guys. You really don't need any other leads. You could go the route of self-generation. That would be the only difference for telesales. I don't recommend that until you get some traction in the business. When you're getting up and running, you can predictably sell. You kind of got the scripting down. That's when I would potentially get into the world of self-generation of leads. But up to that point, if you're brand new, I wouldn't recommend it, because learning the script is hard enough. Trust me, it's hard enough. But then on top of that, learning how to market for sales, man, that's tough. So one at a time is kind of how I look at it.